Dr. Usha Vasthare, the founder of Yoga Shema Rehabilitation and Wellness Center, has been a resident of USA for the past 3 decades. She completed her BSc with a gold medal and rank, MSc with a rank from Bangalore University, and obtained her PhD from Mysore University in the year 1981. She has been a faculty of Temple University School of Medicine, Philadelphia, USA for a period of 17 years. Post her career at the Temple University, she also essayed the role of Clinical Research Project Coordinator at the Center for Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders, Pennsylvania Hospital, Philadelphia. She has published over 70 research papers and abstracts in reputed journals and contributed to 5 books used for continuing medical education course. She was academic research advisor for MDs, postdoctoral fellows, PhD and master students, and has been trained in hospice care for the terminally ill. In India, she has worked with Deen Bandhu Children's Home, Chamaraj Nagar, and continues to work with Swami Vivekananda Memorial Hospital and various other institutions ranging from social to educational. Dr. Vasthare conducts support group meetings for various sections of the society, ranging from homemakers, professionals, to survivors of chronic illnesses and their caregivers. So far, she has conducted more than 500 such meetings. Her workshops are based on the most recent advances in neuroscientific research and are geared to the participants in improving their quality of life. Her programs have been telecast in leading television networks like Suvarna, Udaya, Chandana, etc., as well as in radio and newspapers such as Vijay Karnataka and Udayavani in Karnataka. She has also conducted similar workshops in USA and have been featured in various radio talk shows there. So now, without any further delay, I request Dr. Vasthare to deliver her speech.
Here we go again. Respected Swamijis of the Ramakrishna Order, Honorable Faculty of IIT, and my dear students. It's a privilege and honor to share with you some of the recent advances in neuroscience on mind management. Mind management ultimately is about training ourselves to be happy, to be peaceful, to be loving, to be kind, to be gentler, or in other words, to have positive and healing emotions. And it is also about how not to be greedy, how not to suffer, how not to get uncontrollable anger, again, to train ourselves, how not to have such negative and afflictive emotions. Because there is clear-cut evidence such negative, afflictive emotions have a correlation with many of the illnesses, including cardiovascular disorders and up to cancer. While trying to maintain this positive state of mind, we try and avoid, quote unquote, the wrong people, or we try and seek company of the right people. And also, we try and depend and count on external circumstances and people around us to help us to be happy. And we also try and avoid certain external circumstances and people who bring some suffering to us. Maybe rightly so. However, by the end of this hour, we will realize that irrespective of the external circumstances and people around us, that we need to develop certain strategies and manage our minds to be happy irrespective of external circumstances and people around us. That is what this talk is about, to bring that awareness. To be doing this, we are going to see how, which type of mind we will be using. In other words, we're going to learn about different types of mind and that which connect to different parts of the brain. We're going to see how and when to use which type of mind. Because biologically we are wired to be feeling creatures that think. But we are also thinking creatures that feel. We're going to develop better discerning powers or discrimination power to be able to know when we should think first, when we should feel first. Sometimes we need to think first and then feel later. At other times we need to feel first and then think later. So we're going to develop better discerning powers to be able to do so. And whatever I'm going to be speaking, you will see there is nothing new. And especially for the Indian community, somewhere or other, we have heard about all of this. Both as I was saying, whatever I'm going to talk about today, there is nothing new for all of us. What is new is there is scientific evidence and proof for what we already know. And it is evidence-based research. And as already Swamiji has mentioned, how our mind can be a friend or a foe. It is said in Upanishads, and the same thing has been said in Bhagavad Gita. But only people who truly believe in Krishna might agree to that. Otherwise, we would just recite the shlokas and not think about it too much, or maybe we would recite only through bhakti and not thinking about how can our minds be friends or be a friend or a foe. However, the recent advances in neuroscience research, especially because of the decade of the brain that happened between 1990 and 2000, when George Bush was the president, which again was a result of Dalai Lama coaxing the neuroscientists, Western neuroscientists about this, there is explosion of research that has happened to be understanding mind. It only stayed at the level of mind. Now, very recently, we are talking about, as scientists, even at the consciousness level. But we are still far away from truly understanding deeply what Upanishads have already said about either mind or consciousness. But it's a great start. It's a great start in the neuroscientific field. So even though there is nothing new in what I'm saying, the terminology is different, and we have certain laws, we have certain neuroscientific concepts, that when we follow these in a systematic, organized manner, that we will be able to achieve the results that we want. And if we are not able to achieve, all we need to do is to fine tuning, because as we all know, science is about producing reproducible results. So if we are not getting the results that we need, all we need to do is to change something or fine tune to be able to get the results that we want. So all this evidence-based research is on the mind and consciousness. This is what Swami Vivekananda has already said. And whatever Swamiji has said is based on the Upanishads and the Gita, as we already know. So each and every slide of mine we can quote from Swamiji's. Those who have studied Swamiji, we know whatever is in the complete works, there is nothing left behind in the complete works of Swamiji. However, I'm going to maintain the scientific perspective and then give you information in a scientific manner, and only when it is too obvious and the ones that we already know, the either the famous or the usual quotes that we all know from Swamiji, which is going to help us to implement these concepts, I'm just going to touch upon it. But we can at length discuss whatever Swamiji has said that we now have the scientific evidence, and then we can think about it during the interactive session. Having said that, why are we here? We usually give reasons that we are not happy because of external circumstances. However, we're going to see today that we are here to understand how our mind works, and also how to change our minds in a systematic, organized manner to be able to get the results that we want, and not be able to change somebody else's behavior so we can be happy. Many a times that is what we trying to change somebody else's behavior, trying to change and control just the external circumstances for us to be happy. Before I go further, I would like to start with a story. This is part of Ramayana. It's actually an epic called Yoga Vasishta. And this is a little modified version of a story in Yoga Vasishta. And this happened when Rama was a few years younger than you all. He was hardly about 13 or 14. Before he was taken away by Vishwamitra, both Lakshmana and Rama were taken by Vishwamitra to help Vishwamitra in doing the yagas, to try and prevent the negative forces that would come about. So it is before that time. And if I were to see Rama at that time, I would say Rama had a clear-cut case of clinical depression. Yes, Rama, being the prince, had no interest whatsoever in anything in the palace. So much so he would not even groom himself. He was in such sad state of affairs. And at that time, Vishwamitra tells Dasharatha, if you bring Vasishta Muni, he will be able to impart knowledge to Rama so that Rama will come out of this depression state. So Vasishta Muni comes along and he recites this story to Rama. So you all imagine that you're in you don't have to imagine, you are in a forest. You are in a beautiful forest. So just imagine the other things. You are already in a forest. And Vasishta Muni is walking in your forest here. And behind him, there is a being with many heads and twice the number of hands. And this being had a weapon in each and every hand. It's left to your imagination. You can imagine any number of weapons, starting from a needle to an AKA rifle. This being is following Vasishta Muni. As it is following, it has so many weapons in its hand, so it starts hitting its head, and there are so many heads. It starts hitting its head and cries out loud, "Oh, I am suffering, I am suffering." Vasishta looks around and says, "Why are you hitting yourself? Stop hitting yourself and you're going to be fine." But this being doesn't listen to Vasishta Muni, keeps hitting its head with many of the weapons, but keeps following Vasishta Muni. Vasishta Muni ignores and he keeps walking. As they are going in the forest, there is a deep well, and this being falls into the well. Again cries out loud, "I was suffering in the light, now I am suffering in the dark." Somehow it crawls and creeps and gets out of the well and starts following Vasishta Muni again. And then soon it comes to a beautiful lake with many fruit-laden trees. So it becomes happy. It throws away some of the weapons, plucks some of the fruits and starts eating the fruits. And Vasishta Muni thinks, at last it is being happy, it is eating some fruits. No sooner than that, the being starts hitting itself with the weapon. It is eating a fruit with one hand and with one mouth, and in the other hand it starts hitting its head and then cries out loud, "I am suffering and suffering." At that time, Vasishta Muni imparts certain knowledge to that being, which it recognizes, and then it accepts and starts throwing away all the weapons, and it gets enlightened. And then Vasishta Muni asks Rama, "Do you know who this being is?" Rama, already young, he says, "No, I can't remember who this is. Maybe my parents have shown, but I don't remember who it is." Then Vasishta Muni says, "You probably have guessed by now what that being is." Vasishta Muni says to Rama, "This being is in you, and it's also in me, and it's also in everybody, the rest of you. That being is none other than our mind." If we can go just a little deeper into this story and see, there is no difference with what we go through. That story is very symbolic. We have everything, but we still keep hitting ourselves. And what are those weapons? You can imagine those weapons. Anything and everything that you think of, as simple as either my teacher or my parent or my friend said something, I never did anything like that, and I am hurt. Starting from that little thought or whatever has gone through, either just the day before or few years back, as a matter of fact, that is what hurts us. And then we keep remembering those things over and over and over again, and that is how we suffer. From that, you can imagine any number of examples. I don't even want to go through that. And the being falls down in the well. It was suffering when there was light. And now the challenges that we face in our lives when we fall down into the well, of course, then we have all the right to suffer, because we suffered when we had everything, and now we have challenges. Of course, we have to suffer, right? That righteous indignation we tell ourselves. Somehow we come out of that too, and then we enjoy at one time, and then we again suffer. And then we have plenty of reasons for that. We have an exam or a test, we suffer. The next day, there is movie watching and then we are happy. This is the plight of affairs that we all go through. And whatever Vasishtha Muni told Rama, after that, of course, there are many thousands of verses that Yoga Vasishtha, it's a big epic altogether. But we are going to see how we can learn that in the most scientific manner. Because, of course, we are all rational thinkers, and whenever I talk to younger people, they say, we don't have time to meditate and then wait for so many years even to understand this little bit. But science, of course, tells us, what is science? We condense everything and then we have to do the least amount to get the maximum benefit, right? So we have packaged in such a way that even doing a little bit, we will be able to get maximum results without waiting for years. And that is the exciting part, that we don't need to wait for many years of sadhana, because mind management is about moment to moment to moment. It is not, as Professor was saying, after we die, whatever that mukti is here and now and here, ihaiva. And that is what science has proved, and it is still proving. And so we have just started. And there is so much more to go, that if we follow these neuroscience concepts and implement in a structured, organized way, we will be able to get results instantly. That is what has excited me to come back from there, to be able to share this with people. Because mostly in West, we started using these research ideas on people with either chronic illnesses or mental disorders, but only few people have certain illnesses. But it's all for us, you and me, and all of us who are hale and healthy, to be able to know this, understand, so that we can improve our quality of lives. So with that, we will see how we can learn to manage our minds, and what prevents us, most importantly, what prevents us. And we know, irrespective of race, caste, creed, age, whether one is a saint or a scientist, professor or a student, president or a pauper, we all have bias, a negativity bias. What do I mean by that? The negativity bias that we have, you can think of it like this: our mind acts like Velcro. It sticks for negative thoughts, negative emotions, negative feelings, negative experiences. However, anything that is positive, be it my thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences, it gets slipped away just like a non-stick Teflon material. This is the bias that we all have. And this is what is preventing us to lead the lives that we want, to be happy, to be kinder, to be gentler. Just understanding this itself is enough. Just creating this awareness itself is enough for us to be able to change this. So whole mind management is about reversing this bias that we have. Because of this bias, as you can see, it's an acronym, the ANTS. A picture, what is seen in the slide, is an acronym of the negativity bias, the ANTS, the automatic negative thoughts. We're going to see where these ANTS come from, which type of the mind, which part of the brain these ANTS come from in a few minutes. But let us understand why. Why do we need to go a little bit deeper in understanding these ants? Just like we can classify ants, many ants, black ants, red ants, fire ants, termites, the same way we can classify even with our thoughts. Some are like black ants, innocuous negative thoughts. Maybe you can ignore. But there are some fire ants, and especially the termites. Definitely, as soon as you get the termites, just like how we exterminate the termites, we need to exterminate those ants in our mind. And why? Because when these ants go unchecked, and just like the ants, these automatic negative thoughts, they also come in groups. You hardly see one ant here or there. Usually they come in groups of ants or in a straight line, as we see when we go out to a picnic. So you usually get these automatic negative thoughts one after another. And for all of these statements, there is scientific evidence why it happens. And then we will see that later when we have the time during the interaction. When these ants go unchecked, these ants, automatic negative thoughts, they affect our interpersonal relationships, they affect our health, they affect our work, and they affect our entire life itself. And these ants, again, when they go unchecked, most of the times either we are going between past or future, like a pendulum. Our past we look at with regret, and the future is filled with anxiety and pessimism. And the present is never satisfactory. And the type of excuses that we give, not even the reasons, we actually give excuses for these ants that we get. We go through all the excuses, and when we cannot find any, we finally come to, this is the way I'm born, this is in my genes, because even my mom keeps saying, you are just like your grandfather, you get angry, you're so short-tempered, you get angry so fast, you're just like your grandfather, so you blame it on the genes. But again, just a sentence here, now we cannot even blame it on the genes. Again, science tells us, actually there is an adage in Kannada. I'll just say that adage in Kannada and I'll translate that to you. Then you will realize. Huttu guna sutturu biduvudilla. What it means is, some of the qualities that you are born with, you take it to the grave. That means you won't be able to change some of the qualities, and everybody believes it. Most of the people believe in this adage. But now science has disproved this adage, this gade. How we know? The epigenetic research shows that it is still possible to change the expression of the genes by changing the environment, by changing our lifestyle, by changing our internal milieu and the external environment, by changing our thoughts. It is possible to change the expression of the genes. So we cannot even give that excuse anymore. And what are the consequences of these unchecked ants? all these consequences, we cannot be happy the way we want it to be. We cannot be proactive. We cannot be as empathetic and kind and gentle as we would like to be. And it is not possible for us to change easily because all of us have some unwanted old habits that we want to change, or we want to acquire some new good habits, but it is these ants that prevent us in getting rid of those old habits and also acquiring new habits. And ultimately we get frustrated because we don't know what to do, because the solution does not come in a bottle with colored pills. This is only through awareness and educating ourselves how to prevent, avoid, and overcome these ants. Ultimately, we now say that ants are nothing but bad brain habits. And we're going to see in a few minutes what I mean by a habit from a neuroscience perspective. We know what are habits, but what does it mean? What happens in the brain, structurally what happens in the brain when I say a habit? But these ants are nothing but bad brain habits. And most importantly, most of these ants are false. Most of the ants are false. If we can remember this when we are going through a lot of negativity, including the anxiety that we go through before an exam, that is also an ant. If we can remember that most ants are false and to be able to question these ants, then we'll be able to get answers right away. But the hardest part is, even when we question, we kind of rationalize our own negativity. Because the only way we will get the right answer if we are really truthful to ourselves. And we know when we are really truthful to ourselves how painful it is. And that also that is our ego that is coming in the way, that accepting these are real negative thoughts and there is no meaning to that, and this is not really true, to accept that either it's our ego that comes in the way, so we keep on defending these ants. I get these ants only because of this subject. Only because of this professor, he is so hard, otherwise I would be okay in other subjects. So we keep defending ourselves for all the negativity that we get. However, before we go into what a habit is in a neuroscientific way, Aristotle defined habit as we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not just an act but a habit. We have modified what Aristotle has said to we are what we repeatedly think. Excellence then is not just an act but our habitual way of thinking. So if that is the case, if ants are bad brain habits, then we have a choice whether we're going to follow certain bad habits or good habits. And whether we know it or not, every moment we are choosing. Even when we are not choosing, that is still a choice. We may not know. But every moment we are choosing. So we have the ability to choose which habit that we want to follow. I'm talking right now at the thought level, whether it's a bad habit or a good habit. And of course, even at the action level, it follows. again, author of Harry Potter, the series of Harry Potter, she says, it's our choices that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. But we still keep focusing on our abilities. But it is much more than that. What we choose is what helps us to utilize those abilities, because there are so many studies that have been done, especially with people whose cognitive intelligence is very high, like all of you in this room, and especially when they go out in the work field, if their emotional intelligence, if their social intelligence, if their spiritual intelligence is not integrated with their cognitive intelligence, it is so hard to be successful out in the world. So it is the choices that we make and not just our abilities that make us truly who we are. Just something to think about. So if that is the case, how can we reverse this bias? And that is the only way we'll be able to, because it's not just with the thoughts, but also with emotions and feelings. We're going to see soon how emotions and feelings are connected with thoughts. So ultimately, this reversing this negativity bias will lead to converting our difficult and afflictive emotions into healing emotions. And at this juncture, it's good to remember what Rabindranath Tagore spoke about Vivekananda. He says, in him everything is positive. You cannot see anything that is negative in Vivekananda. However, I don't think he didn't have any negativity when he was young, when he was going through a lot of hardship in his childhood days and teen years. But he was able to change and reverse this negativity bias for Rabindranath to be making this statement about Swami Vivekananda. And we know it is science. If he can do it, you can do it. You can do it too. And then we will see how. As I was saying earlier, 1990 to 2000 was the decade of the brain. Just before that, the present Dalai Lama actually challenged the Western neuroscientists, saying that if you change your mind, you can change the very structure of the brain. In neuroscientific field, it was unheard of. However, thanks, there was advent of new technology like fMRI, SPECT and PET scans that helped to actually look at brain in action and look at brain over a period of time, which is what helped the neuroscientists. And Dalai Lama sent a battalion of Buddhist monks with 10,000 hours, 20,000 hours, 30,000 hours of meditation practice to be scanned in US and in Europe. And we did realize that it is possible to change the very structure of the brain if we change our minds. Not changing our minds as to, oh no, I don't want coffee now, I would like to have tea. Not that changing the mind in a flippant way, but in a highly structured, organized way. Putting our willful effort. When we can do that, yes, it is possible to change the very structure of the brain. Once we change the structure of the brain, our whole life changes. So this whole talk is about, if we can change our thoughts in an organized, structured, willful way, it is possible to change our structure of the brain. And the same way, if we can change our feelings towards certain things, It is possible to change the very structure of the brain. And if we can change, not just if, of course, the experience has to change. When we change our thoughts in a willful, structured, organized manner, because every action is before every action is a thought, or a thought is a precursor for every action that you see. So if you can change, ultimately changing our thoughts and feelings will result in the change in the experience. It will change the very structure of the brain. And once the structure of the brain changes in a permanent manner, our life can change. And this is again what Vivekananda was talking about, that you can actually change or create your own destiny. By changing our thoughts, we change our actions, which result in changing our habits. And if we change our habits, we can change our character and personality. That is what results in creating or changing or making our own destiny. And that is the science behind Vivekananda's statement, which he made over 100 years back. Now, to switch gears, now let's try and understand what this mind is about. Different types of mind, and where does this mind come from? Let's see. Again, we all know this Swamiji's statement. Yes, we are what we think. Whatever you think, you will be. Such a powerful statement by Swamiji. Again, we have ample scientific evidence to prove all his statements on thought and mind. Coming to the mind, we have two types of mind. One is the habitual mind. The other is the willful mind. Another name for habitual mind is the emotional mind. And another name for the willful mind is conscious mind. It's also called the rational mind. Whereas the habitual mind is also called, I prefer to call it non-conscious mind, but you usually see it as a subconscious mind, non-conscious mind, habitual mind, emotional mind. These are the different names for habitual mind. Whenever we are using our habitual mind, we are just in the survival mode. We are not learning anything new. For us to be learning something new, which means if we want to change, if we need to evolve, then we need to be using our willful mind, our conscious mind to be able to do that. So let's see, where does that mind come from, in which part of the brain? Before we go to the structure of the brain, I just want to touch upon three aspects of brain again, which is going to help us to implement these to be able to change our mind in a particular way. We've all heard that the brain has unlimited potential. It's an overused statement. However, to be able to comprehend that statement, that we have unlimited potential, and how many statements that Swamiji has made about this unlimited potential. But for us to able to cognize it and to comprehend and understand this unlimited potential, let's just look at the number of brain cells that we have. Not even number of brain cells. Let's look at number of neurons, which is one type of brain cell. We also have other type of brain cell called supporting cells, which scientists have just begin to understand the role of supporting cells. So we will stick to just the neurons we are all familiar with. The number of neurons that we have is so much, it is really hard, at least for me, to comprehend that number. If I write 1 carried by so many 12, 13, 14 zeros, it's really hard for me to comprehend. So I use a different way of making people understand the number of neurons that we have. It's only the number of neurons that I'm talking about. If we start counting the neuron, and let's assume that it takes about 1 second to count each neuron, literally it will take over 3,100 years to count all the neurons that we have. And mind you, that is only the number of neurons I'm talking about. And the supporting cells outnumber the neurons. And we're not even getting into supporting cells. And that is only number of neurons. Just like one person is communicating with 100 other people, neurons also communicate with each other. In normal circumstances, in usual places in the brain, each neuron can communicate up to 10,000 to 40,000 other neurons. And in still some other regions of the brain, each neuron can communicate up to 100,000 other neurons. So it is just mind-boggling to know just the number of neurons that we have. Again, what does science tell us? If we didn't need those neurons, we would not have had them. Just like we have lost during our evolution some of the organs that we did not need, be it a tail, or it could be an appendix, or it could be the third eyelid, they have become vestigial. However, the neurons or certain regions of the brain, when compared to our closest cousins, the four-legged cousins, it is even more developed in humans when compared to our four-legged cousins. So this is but we need to figure out, it's not just to get such high grades to be able to get to IIT and then get a PhD and then go out. There is a reason for all these number of neurons. That is for us to figure out. And the reason, believe it or not, whether you know it or not, the reason is the same for everybody. That is the beauty of it. But sometime or other, we'll all realize the real reasons for this many number of neurons that we have within ourselves, and to be able to use that to achieve the goal of this and the purpose of our human life, the existence of human life. And the second aspect of brain that I want to bring about is brain is the biggest apothecary that you can find. It is the biggest medical store. It is like a chemical factory, because every thought releases a chemical. Every emotion releases a chemical. Every feeling releases a chemical. So our brain is the biggest apothecary that one can find. The third aspect is the brain also acts like a magician. It will give, it is waiting for us to ask for it, whatever we want. The only thing is, we know, we have all done this when we were little. Whatever we want, our parents would bring, right? That is not the case here. We can ask anything, and it will be able to give us. The only thing is, we need to follow it up with actions. You can have any desire that you want. You will be able to achieve the desire as long as you follow those desires with the action. That is the key hallmark part of how we can use our brains to be like a magician or a genie. So coming to the anatomy of the brain, in medical school, one whole semester is taught for anatomy, neuroanatomy. We don't need any of that. For our implementation purposes, whatever we need, I have simplified to such a great extent, all we need to remember are just two parts, and which is not even in Greek and Latin, just English names. All we need to know is higher center and lower center. This lower center, there are different parts in the lower center. It could be midbrain, cerebellum, brainstem. There is one part which is also called reptilian brain, which acts the same way as in reptiles. You probably have heard limbic system, deep limbic system. That is the part of the lower center. Whereas the higher center, and especially one part of the higher center called the frontal cortex, which is just behind this forehead, which is what makes us truly human. This higher center, especially the PFC or the prefrontal cortex, is what makes us truly human. And we can go into in depth about the functions of both the centers, but we need a whole day for that, because whatever we do in a one-day workshop, I'm just condensing an hour or 90-minute talk. But if you can just remember this, that our free will that we talked about, for us to be able to manage our minds, to be able to choose, the discrimination power, discerning power, and the free will, what comes from the higher center. And the lower center, whatever we do in an automatic way, without thinking, we do so many things in a day, starting from when we get up, it could be brushing our teeth, or when we leave, doing pranams to the God, or while we make tea or coffee at home, we know who will take how much sugar a person takes, all of that. We don't think about it. Everything is automatic pilot. So that is where we are using our lower center to such an extent that things, and it's very efficient. It's extremely efficient to be using the lower center. And not only that, all our bodily functions, be it beating of the heart or the respiratory system, the GI system, all of that is controlled by the activity of the lower center. And so does our blood pressure regulation, our blood sugar regulation. All of that is controlled by the lower center. And if I have to combine the mind along with the different parts of the brain, from the higher center arises our willful mind, the conscious mind, the rational mind. Whereas the lower center is the non-conscious mind, or the habitual mind, or the emotional mind. And the ants we talked about, the negativity bias that we have, is because when we use our lower center so much that we get plenty of these ants. That is the correlation between the mind and the brain. So, to be able to have a healthy brain, what is it that we need to be doing? We need to be using and thinking more from our higher center, and we need to be using our lower center in terms of thinking much less of the higher center. And both of this can be achieved in a stimulating environment like here, when we are students, when we are learning. However, stimulating, yes, but it should also be associated with a relaxed environment. That is when we can develop a healthy brain. So, coming to what a thought is from a neuroscience perspective and what a habit is, because we already said these ants are bad brain habits. So in order to reverse this bias, in order to overcome these ants, we need to understand how these habits are formed and what happens in the brain when habits are formed. We'll go into that. Again, each and every slide we can have so many of Swamiji's sayings, and it's so nice that we have so ample evidence and proof for every statement that he made. Maybe he has used different terminology. We will see soon whatever the terms that he used. He would say, when you think deeply, a path is created, a groove is created. And we're going to see what he meant by that. And the neuroscientific terminology we use for whatever he said over 100 years back. This is again one of my favorite statements by Swamiji, where he says, fill the brain with high thoughts, highest ideals. And when we have a lot of these ants, it's really hard to follow this statement, we can see. And place them before you day and night, night and day. And out of that will come great work. So if we need to do great work, it is really going to be hard with that bias that we have. Until and unless we overcome that bias, it's really going to be tough to do great work and also enjoy that too. So if that is the case, what is a thought from a neuroscience perspective? What is a thought? I never asked this. It's so hard to actually express what a thought is. That again shows that we have given such little importance to our thought process, because we go to schools and colleges to study every subject under the sun, including how to breathe. We have yoga instructors, we learn to do pranayama, how to breathe, deep breathing exercises, but thoughts are even subtler than our breath. And even if we don't breathe, we can be hooked up to a machine and then a machine can breathe for us. However, if we do not know, or if we don't train ourselves to think properly, it is going to be so hard. And this, I keep saying, whenever I get even from 30 people to 3,000 people, this is what is needed, and this is what we need our youngsters, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. We need to train them how to think their thoughts. And we will soon see, because emotions are so very much connected with thoughts. And whatever we go through in our life, the stress, how they are related to our emotions and thoughts, that we can all train the little ones, the 4-year-old and 5-year-old, how to be thinking and how to manage the emotions. And it has actually started in the West in some of the schools, even to show teach how to manage their emotions in a certain way. We will get to that. But thought is nothing but an idea that just happens. When that idea happens, when that thought occurs, an idea happens, if it happens over and over and over and over again, we start believing it. And what happens to that thought or the idea? We know that we have studied in high school biology that there is an electrochemical reaction that happens so that a thought moves on. But I already said, and again, every thought actually releases a chemical. And even before that, when these ideas occur over and over and over again, we start believing these ideas and thoughts. However, we need to remember it's a basic neuroscience concept which we can all understand now, but when we are getting certain types of thoughts, we forget this, that not all thoughts are true. They are real. They are real because they release a chemical, and we can actually measure that. However, not all thoughts are true. Only when we question them will we be able to find out whether these thoughts are true or not. Again, to keep repeating because it's another basic neuroscience concept which is so important for us to remember, especially during implementation of all of these concepts, that every thought, without any exception, releases a chemical. This releases a chemical. Later on, if we have time, we will see how this particular neuroscience concept is actually connected with many of the mental disorders or mental afflictions, mental illnesses, this particular neuroscience concept. And now, coming to the connection between feelings and thoughts, when every thought releases a chemical, and depending on the chemical that is released, it also produces a similar type of feeling. And the feelings again produce chemicals producing similar thoughts. Again, this is the basis of the tool that we are going to see how to manage our minds, how to change our minds in a particular way. This is one of the slides which is extremely important for us to understand the connection between thoughts and feelings, and the chemicals are released when either thoughts or feelings occur. So thinking creates the feeling and feeling creates the thinking. Understanding this at times, especially when we have those ants, a lot of ants, to be able to break this cycle, because the cycle becomes a vicious cycle. And when we can convert that into a positive one, then that is the whole idea. It becomes a vicious cycle, becomes a virtuous cycle. As already mentioned, that every action, everything, every experience, whatever we do under the sun, it begins from a thought. A thought producing a feeling, producing an action. So, if that is the case, let us see what happens at the level of the brain when habits are formed. As I mentioned, a repeated conscious thoughts, that is at the higher center level, at the conscious mind level or the willful mind level, when a thought occurs over and over and over again, it becomes later into non-conscious thinking. That means it has already moved to the lower center of the brain. It has become habitual. And that non-conscious thinking becomes our non-conscious ways of being. And when that happens, we say it gets hardwired into the brains. And this is how a habit is formed, whether we know it or not. First, it starts off at the conscious level. And when it happens over and over and over again, it becomes non-conscious ways of thinking and non-conscious ways of being, and that's how it certainly gets hardwired into the brains. And this is what Swamiji was talking about. Whatever you do, it forms a groove in the brain. He was talking about the hardwiring part. And earlier we thought once it gets hardwired, it is not possible to change that. However, again, just like we saw before, the newest neuroscience evidence shows even though things get hardwired into the brain, it is possible to rewire the brain and change these habits. Why do we need to change these habits? Again, the negativity bias producing the ants. Because thoughts are fleeting, they come and go. But if these thoughts occur over and over again, they form certain patterns. Thought patterns are formed. And in neuroscientific terminology, the thought patterns, the second box, what we call it as an attitude. Attitude is nothing but similar thought patterns that have happened because of repeated conscious thoughts. And these thought patterns are what's going to result in our habits. And these habits what is going to create our personalities. So if we don't take care of our thoughts, those ants that we get, it will eventually end up being ending up as a negative attitude, negative habit, turning into a negative personality, which takes it even longer to be able to change. So if we can be aware and track those ants at the thought level and be able to change moment to moment, then we don't need to wait until it gets into a personality and then figure out, when everybody will be saying, you have such a negative personality, what happened to you? You were not like this earlier. What happened to you after you went to IIT? So, before that happens, if we can be aware and if we can track our thoughts at the thought level, because as I said, the management is moment to moment, we'll be able to prevent it in becoming a personality. So how do we do this? This is where, again, one of my favorite concepts, what we termed as neurosculpting, there is so much resemblance and a confluence of science and spirituality. You will see in spirituality, what do they say? Whatever our innate being, that's always, it's pure, right? Whatever we may call Satchidananda, we don't even have to name names, but we know that all our innate beings is so pure. And we have that innate happiness within us, but yet we cannot experience that because it's all covered up with layers and layers and layers of ignorance, is what the spirituality texts they say, whether it's in Vedanta, which consists of Upanishads and Upanishads. However, taking a scientific perspective of that, yes, we have that innate intelligence, innate happiness within us, but because of these ants, because of this negativity bias, it's all covered up. We cannot feel it. And that is again what they might term it as Maya or whatever. We won't even get there. We will stick to the scientific aspect. So how do we manifest this that is already within us? That is where I give that analogy of a sculptor. What does a sculptor do? He sees a big boulder. For you and I, it is a big, huge rock. But a sculptor sees, if he is trying to sculpt out an elephant, he sees an elephant in that big boulder, which is just a big boulder for you and I, but he sees the elephant, and whatever that is not elephant, he takes it out. Whatever that is not elephant, when it is taken out, what remains is just the elephant. In the same way, we don't need this negativity, definitely. None of us will not need any of these negativity bias that we have, negative thoughts, negative emotions, negative feelings, negative experiences. If we can take that away, what remains is what we really want. And that is the concept of neurosculpting. And this is what, again, Swamiji has been talking about when he says, you can create your own destiny. When we remove all our unwanted things, what remains and whatever we want, we can create it. And that is why the statement by Tagore on Vivekananda says, everything in him is positive. Swamiji was the best neurosculptor that you can find. And you can, that means he's also the best role model for all of us to be able to follow him, to be neurosculptors. So we can all be our own neurosculptors, just like Swamiji was. So how do we neurosculpt our way to positivity and to happiness and to be kind and to be gentle and to be all loving and all forgiving? This is what we call it as, we have to just rewire our brains. The negativity bias is already hardwired, but now we know that it is possible to rewire our brains. And we're going to use two techniques, which is cognitive behavior training and mindfulness. Quickly we will go through what each one is, and then we'll see. One of the basis or foundation for cognitive behavior training is to understand that there is a connection between body and mind. It's very simple. We all know that. There is nothing new. That we all know that there is a very close connection between body and mind. We are all healthy and fine, but our friend says something and then we get upset, and somehow if we are sensitive enough, we will see the result right away. And in the same way, we are quite happy, but you go and trip and then you sprain your toe and see what happens to our mind because of that. What I'm saying is, we all know, we have an experience that there is a very close connection between body and mind. It's a no-brainer. However, we need to know that there is also connection between body, mind and behavior. This is the foundation for understanding how to implement our cognitive behavior training. That there is a very close connection between our body, our mind and our behavior. If that is the case, then how do we use this cognitive behavior training in order to be able to change our negativity bias that we have? We'll see. Cognitive behavior training entails two aspects. One is the metacognition, using metacognition skills, and the other one is mind rehearsal. Metacognition skills, you probably already know about this, that it's all about thinking about our own thoughts, being self-aware, thinking about our beliefs, thinking about our perceptions. And we are the only ones as human beings who have the ability to do this. No other animal, as we know, has this ability to be self-aware to the extent that we can be. To be thinking about our thoughts, whether whatever I'm doing, whether it is right or wrong, good or bad, is this wise or not? I know I love to play certain games, and then I know when I start playing, I cannot stop after half hour. I keep going, and tomorrow I have a test. Is this wise for me to be playing? Because many a times when I talk to a group of students, is one thing that comes about, especially now these days with playing the games. I always think whatever weakness that we have, if we call that as a weakness, if you consider that as a weakness, if it is affecting yourselves, that we need to learn to convert our weakness into strength. Whether it is too much TV watching, or playing too much video games, or too much internet browsing, whatever it is, whatever the weaknesses that we may have, but we need to be truthful to admit that it is a weakness first, and have the belief system that we need to change that weakness. Once if we can do that, then to be able to change this is what this whole CBT is all about. That means we need to be really truthful to ourselves. As I said earlier, it is the hardest part to be so truthful to know that it's a weakness. And all we need to do is to convert it into a strength. We can take that up during the Q&A session, how we can do that. Because as I said, whenever we have a bunch of youngsters, students, this is a common question that I get. So even before we get the question, I'm just prodding and then queuing you up for that question if you are interested in asking. We will take it up later. But as I was saying, being aware of ourselves, that self-awareness, that feature is only there for human beings. No other animal has this. So thinking about all of this is what we call it as metacognition skills. And I know we all do this. Right from young days, we have been taught to reflect, especially during the night time before you go to bed. Think about everything that you have done. And yes, we do. Sometimes we do it mechanically and sometimes we forget. All I'm doing is to acknowledge whatever we have been doing is the right thing. And once we know that is the right way, we can even do it with more fervor and with more enthusiasm. And the other aspect of cognitive behavior training is about mind rehearsal. Again, in spiritual life, this is one thing they always say, whatever you do, you need to be ready at the mind level. You prepare yourself and then you think about it, you prepare your mind, and whatever you want to do, it will be done later. So mind rehearsal is about seeing and imagining and thinking about whatever you want to do even before that happens. And for that we use a tool called affirmations. And affirmations, many a times we even customize, because affirmations can be used as a therapy, as a therapeutic way of treating some of the mental disorders or certain of the mental conditions too. Because many a times each affirmation acts like medicine. How does it act? Because as already mentioned, every thought releases a chemical, and these affirmations are usually positive, and when it is customized, when it is told over and over and over and over again, it produces the right type of chemicals to be able to deal with it. As simple as when we undergo stress during the exam, saying affirmation as simple as, yes, I'm ready for this exam and I'll be able to do it better. You have seen this on TV with athletes. Every time when they are ready, they affirm themselves saying that, yes, I can do it. And that is nothing but repeating mentally, mind rehearsal, saying it over and over again even before something actually happens in the action. So both metacognition skills and mind rehearsal are the two aspects of cognitive behavior training. And this is again what earlier I had put that statement, whatever we think we become. So whatever we think during the affirmation, that is what we will become, is again giving a neuroscientific way of saying what Swamiji has already said. And coming to the second aspect of the tools that we are going to use for neurosculpting, which is for mind management, is mindfulness. And many times mindfulness is again a overused term these days for everything. We just use it. But let us try and understand mindfulness in a simplest of simple manner to be able to help us to implement. So, what is mindfulness? As soon as we say mindfulness, there are three aspects that are involved. One is that we need to be in the present moment. But we have already seen that if we have too many ants, how it is so hard to be in the present moment. We're going back and forth between past and present and never in the present moment. And even if we are in the present moment, it is mostly unsatisfactory is what we said. But mindfulness is to be in the present moment. Not going into the past or worrying about the future, but being in the here and now and here. But in a particular way, in the most conscious manner and paying attention in a particular way in the present moment is what is being mindful. Again, paying attention, being in the present moment, and the most important aspect is to be non-judgmental. These three aspects what constitute mindfulness. Just three simple aspects: to be in the now, to be paying attention in a particular way, and to be non-judgmental is to be mindful. And the same mindfulness, we have a couple of other definitions which we're going to see soon. But when we practice that, I talked about again the mind rehearsal in the CBT, cognitive behavior training, how if we can do that mindfully, that's why the combination of CBT and mindfulness is so powerful. It gives synergy to whatever we're doing. That whatever you practice, that is what you become. It becomes stronger. And that is again what Swamiji has said. And for that, what we call it as, there is a law called Hebbian law, which says the neurons that fire together, they actually wire together. It's such a powerful law that this is how the habits are formed. And you again using the same law, we need to be able to change our habits in order to, again, if we do not fire those neurons, there is certain unwanted habit that we have, and because those neurons keep firing and they're already wired, they're hardwired, that is why we feel like doing something over and over again. And if we need to get out of that habit, we have to stop firing those neurons, which also means we need to stop thinking about that act that we want to be doing, is what is going to help us unwire and again rewire into a newer habit. And when we do that, both our body and mind is in the same place. That is again another hallmark of being mindful. Because many a times our body is here, but the minds are elsewhere. But being both body and mind being together in the same place is again being mindful is all about. And that is again one of the classic definitions of mindfulness that was given by John Kabat-Zinn that you see on the other side. He actually is, he works at Harvard University, and who started this program called MBSR program, Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction Program, for many of the corporates in US, and he's actually copyrighted that, MBSR, wherein he just uses mindfulness to help overcome stress. Whereas through Yogakshema, we use both mindfulness and CBT to be able to do this. Again, there is another aspect of mindfulness, which is again one of my favorites. And especially for students, this is one of the most important definitions, because especially at this level and the students coming to IIT, we don't have any problems focusing in a particular manner, being both body and mind in the same place, we are being mindful. But another aspect of understanding mindfulness is about, we all have our favorites, that we want to do certain things, but we have to do these things, right? There is a clear divide between things that we want to do and things we have to do. Because just few days back, I did a workshop for much younger students, and you all are high school students. When I asked them, do you like going to school? All the kids raised their hands. Yes, we like going to school. And do you like to study? Believe it or not, not even one student raised their hand, but they love going to school. This is what I mean by, we have our preferences. We want to do some things, but we have to do that other thing too. That divide between I want to, I have to, that has to break. That divide has to dissolve. And that is what is being mindful is all about. All it is, it has to be done. It has to be done. And for us to be able to remember this most important aspect of mindfulness is, I use that all the time for years. That's just do it. Actually, that is the Nike commercial. right? If you have seen the ads, I think it is still there. I'm using many years back. That's what it was. The first time Nike commercial came out, they used "just do it." And it's such a powerful thing. If you can just remember those 3 words, just do it, then you will remember mindfulness. The same way for, that's just a little thing for us to remember. The same way for the other definition of mindfulness, that being in the present moment is so important. I have another aspect to remember that in about, oh my goodness, what time is it? It's almost 7:20 that I need to close up. But if I ask you the time, I know that it's 7:20 there. Each one of us will say it's a different time, right? All our watches are different. However, I have a special watch that if I look at the watch and then tell you the time, it will always be perfect and correct. And you can all set your watches based on that. So if I need to do that, I'm going to look at my watch and then say, the time is now. Whenever you ask for the time is now. If you can remember that, that is what's going to trick you to be mindful. Just like the Nike commercial, just do it. And what time is it? The time is now. 2 aspects which will help us to be mindful no matter where you are, whatever you're doing. These 2 aspects will bring us both body and mind together. So how do we develop this? You always say, all of us, we are so good in saying ourselves, we are experts of this, experts of that. However, in neuroscience, if you're going to be mindful, expert mind is not a very good thing to be, we say. Have a beginner's mind, because there are so many possibilities waiting to happen. If you're an expert, you only have one possibility. And that is what it is. That is why you're an expert. But try and develop a beginner's mind to be able to see things from the very different perspective, from a fresh perspective, as though like a child. When a child looks at something for the very first time, if we can develop that attitude and perspective to experience anything and everything in life from the beginner's mind perspective, I think we'll have it. But for me, trying to experience or utilize this mindfulness, this is the toughest aspect of looking anything from a very fresh perspective, as though it is happening for the first time. And especially think about it in relationships. Trying to look at your friend, looking at your parent, or looking at your spouse as though you're looking at that person for the very first time. It is such a beautiful thing, but it is so hard to do. But if we can do that, I think it's the most easy thing to be practicing mindfulness. So in order to practice mindfulness, how do we do this? As I told earlier, in science, we try and make it as simple as possible for you and to get the maximum results. And we know, again, it's all evidence-based, that we know if we can do this consistently, just give yourself either 5 to 10 minutes, every day, same time, same place. If we can practice mindfulness, and that is what is going to help rewire the brains. And also in a long-term basis, CBT, it is moment to moment. At the thought level you change. It is for right away. But for it to really get hardwired and to permanently change, it is this mindfulness practice that happens. That is what is useful for over a long-term period for changes to happen, and for the changes to happen in a permanent manner. It is so simple, but yet we need to be using our higher center, our rational mind, our conscious mind, our willful mind, using our free will and willful effort to be doing this mindfulness practice. And let us see if we can, I'll just conclude this talk in the next 2 slides, and then let us try and see if we can practice that very simple mindfulness practice for just for few minutes. Because now we know in neuroscience, let's say that we have like a platter of mindfulness practices. For different things, we can, it's like a kit. You can do mindfulness practice for loving kindness meditation, what we call it as metta meditation, or for to build up the muscle of compassion. You have compassionate mindfulness practice. To be forgiving, you have forgiveness mindfulness practices. So for each of those healing emotions, we have different types of mindfulness practices, but we will try and practice just one aspect of it before we end up. But with all of this, how do we know? Because thoughts, they're not tangible. We keep saying, whenever we do workshops, they say, I'm changing my thoughts, but I'm still not getting the results. That is what one of the common things people say. But if we are doing it the right way, we will have these tangible measures that we will see that there is an increased willpower to be able to use that willpower to do anything that we want or not do anything that we don't want. Both, it works both ways. And we'll be able to understand our emotions through cognition. What I mean is, when we are so emotional, it is the lower center that is so active. And to be able to question those emotions from a rational manner, using our higher center, and to understand those emotions, that is what we'll be able to do that in a better way. And we'll be able to take and make the decisions with clarity, with clearness. And we'll also be able to master our feelings. And that is what is going to result into a kinder and gentler you. So to conclude, in reversing this negativity bias that all of us have, using these CBT and mindfulness, which is moment to moment to moment, we can see that it helps us to be proactive in whatever we are doing. And to be using our free will and our self-effort, our willful effort, which means we're also using our higher center. And we have seen, to have a healthy brain, that we need to be using our higher center more and more. And that is what we'll be able to do. And no problem in having desires, but we need to be able to match our desires with the actions that we do. Otherwise, that is where, when we don't match our desires with our actions, that is where the frustration comes in. And then many a times, then we suddenly want to follow Buddhism, saying that don't have any desires, because desire is the cause of all evil. I would never ever say that to anybody. Have any desire that you want, but make sure you follow it up with your efforts. And all we need to do when you get to our stage, our age, then you just have to refine what your desires are, then you're already set. And of course we are humans and we do make mistakes, but this is what is going to help us to learn from the mistakes that we do, so that it will give us an opportunity to make newer mistakes, that's all, not making the same mistakes over and over again. And to be able to understand our emotions through cognition is extremely important in mind management. If we cannot do this, if we cannot understand why we behave the way we behave, why we feel the way we feel, it is really going to be hard for us to be managing our minds, our emotions. And all of this will lead to higher energy levels. This is again what Swamiji says. you will be left with so much energy that you will be ready to go conquer anything that you want. It's only the ants that pulls us down. The ants are the ones that depletes our energy. And even though we want to do many of the things, it is going to be hard. So ultimately, the most tangible thing that we can measure when we reverse this bias, we'll be left with so much energy to do whatever we want to do.